And I suppose ultimately we all in the Labour Party, we really want to see infrastructure improved, and we have recognised that there has been a serious deficit in infrastructure and infrastructure projects in this country. But we don't think the bill is the way. We don't think it's addressing some of the real root causes of this, and that includes poor planning, weak oversight. And we think it's a lack of staffing of relevant departments as well. So, we can't support this bill. And the main reason we can't support this bill is not only do we think that it grants too much power to the minister, and we're not just talking about this particular minister yourself, it's future ministers, and we think that it's blurring the lines between the responsibilities of independent bodies that's been taken over by the minister. But most importantly, it's Section 7 that we can't vote in favour of this, because we think that it's been rushed through, and we just think that this whole critical infrastructure bill is undermining everything, the really, really hard work and long work that went into the Climate Action Act. And I think we can, and I suppose I'm coming from a point of view of someone who lives, for example, in the northwest, where we have a real threat about the building of fossil fuel infrastructure. And we think that if this bill goes through, it's going to disregard any negative impact the climate impact is going to have, and also it's going to disregard any climate benefits, like prioritising, we'll say, rail infrastructure over road infrastructure. So I think that, and we, like the Minister, we know you didn't rule out designating fossil fuel infrastructure as part of critical infrastructure, and we said, we don't want to. We all support that we think something needs to change, but we think that there hasn't been enough thought into this, there hasn't been enough deliberation into it, and it's just an easy way out, rather than actually saying that we need to look at things like, for example, the overspend in the Children's Hospital. That's weak oversight, and we don't think that's going to change that. So I think that, and we also, I suppose, and I know that my colleague Senator Kieran, or Deputy Kieran Ahern, has brought this forward, saying that we think that this is going to be real constitutional issues that could see this bill challenged. And the Supreme Court has ruled previously that legislation cannot provide that a government can automatically designate, disapply a core statutory duty without a clear criteria, thresholds or mandatory considerations. And in this case, we think that this bill is going to gut, particularly Section 7, is going to gut out all climate protections, and then it may well prove itself that it is going to be unconstitutional. I think it's very important that we don't fall into this, binary way saying, that it has to be climate action or else infrastructure projects, and I think that's, I don't think anyone that disagrees. And sadly, it is the legacy of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael that we haven't seen key infrastructure projects. I know this from someone living in the northwest, and I don't think you can blame climate action for that, because the Climate Action Act wasn't even around that time. So I think that we're missing, and we look at BAM, for example, is an example of it. We say the Children's Hospital, we have a real problem with public procurements. We can see it as well with Irish Rail, about the 50 million that has been gone now. And I don't think it's fair to blame climate. And I think that's why this debate we're having here is that it's either going to be climate action or it's going to be infrastructure projects. And I think that's the wrong approach. And I think because of that, we're going to be left with billions of fines, which we see we're having to pay already. Where's that money going to be accounted for? And I think it's pitting, again, we're pitting across the house here that, of course I agree with infrastructure, I agree with motorways, but I don't think that any legislation that is going to be introduced is going to undermine the Climate Action Act that we have, that's been there and they spent a long time deliberating on. And I think that and I think, like I've said already, I think it's going to be up that there could be constitutional issues with this, and I hope that the Minister will consider this. I don't think by agreeing with Section 7 or having the climate action as part of the consideration is actually going to impact in any way the delivery of critical infrastructure projects. But I think it should be a key consideration of whether we're going to disregard the climate action or it's going to be seen the negative impacts of climate or the benefits of climate changes are going to have to actually be considered when delivering any critical infrastructure projects. And I think this one-way approach of it's either one or the other, I think is the wrong, and I think that's been proven that it isn't working. Our delivery of infrastructure projects has been very poor in this country, and I don't think that's anything to do with climate. It is just disappointing, I suppose, when we look like judicial reviews are being blamed for an awful lot of delays when there is poor planning, there is poor oversight, and there is poor resourcing of departments as well. And like that has to be recognised as well. But there has to be, it is recognised. Like if you look at the amount of judicial reviews, it's the poor planning. So how would you explain other critical infrastructure projects that are deemed as critical infrastructure projects? Like what about the Children's Hospital? You know, and I know we keep using that as an example, but procurement is an issue. Like public procurement is a big issue here. And I think that we have to be honest and have an honest conversation that, like, it can't be one or the other. It doesn't have to be like that. I think we all agree that we have to reduce emissions. I think, and not even that, we've signed up to the Paris Agreement. We have a climate action. There is a climate act there for a reason, and it is undermining that act. And I think that, so unfortunately, we cannot support this, and this can't be labelled as we're anti-infrastructure, because we're not. We're not anti-development. But what we're anti is that you're pitting one, I suppose, like one a necessity, an essential part of our whole country against another. And I just think that I think it's very short-sighted, and I wish you would reconsider accepting some of our amendments, and that you would actually reconsider having a longer debate about it. And I think it's rushed through, and I just think that it's not been given due consideration. And to be honest about the public procurement issues that we have in the country.